from the various consultative workshops has accumulated to the reason why we're here today. From the agenda given at the registration desk, I believe we all have the agenda. Without much further ado, I would like to start today's program by welcoming on stage Ogane Ovo Ubeabo, our Deputy Team Lead from Propcom Mai-karfi, to give the welcome address. Ladies and gentlemen, please a round of applause for Ovo.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here representing the team leader who, his name is Kevin Geja. He's a very passionate person and has driven several policy issues in Nigeria. He's unavoidably absent, but he sends his regards and appreciates your coming here. And on behalf of the program, I want to specially welcome everyone for taking time off their busy schedules to make it here. It's an indication of your interest and passion to move issues around policy and to help Nigeria as a country define a way that can influence and set a path for mechanization and expanding access in Nigeria. I won't want to take a lot of your time because there will be a lot of talking today. I just want to appreciate everyone who has come from far and wide, south, north, east, and west. Development partners here present, private sector players, all the various stakeholders here represented. We look forward to an engaging time with you here this morning. We hope that you'll be able to give us your own experiences based on the information we have gathered, and we'll be able to decide on issues and areas that can be taken forward by the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and the country at large. So I would just like to end it here for now and ask Godson to come and give a quick overview of all the things that Propcom have been doing within the mechanization space.
Thank you everybody for honoring this invitation. We appreciate your coming. We appreciate your efforts. We appreciate everything you are trying to do. Work with us to unlock solutions to the myriad of problems surrounding the agricultural mechanization sector in Nigeria. We cannot say it too much. We've said it over again and again and again, and we'll keep saying it till one day Nigeria will have a high tractor density. Okay? Presently, like we've always said, Nigeria has just 6 tractors per 10,000 hectares or how many, compared to what we have all over the world. We are very, very far. But before I go on, Johnny does fast, I would want to take 1 or 2, 3 things we have left out. That is the goodwill messages. Okay, are we here? So I'm going to call the very first of our partners, NCAM, the National Center for Mechanization in Lorry, to deliver their goodwill messages. Please, goodwill message, put your hands together for them. That is Dr. Isaac Ozumba. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. On behalf of the Executive Director of the National Center for Agricultural Mechanization, Engineer Dr. M.Y. Kasali, I want to really welcome you to this workshop and to congratulate Propcom Mai-karfi for the efforts they have put in these agricultural mechanization policy issues. I want to also congratulate them for the series of stakeholders workshops that were held in Abuja and in Lagos. I want to thank them for the efforts they have put in to make sure that we get to this level we are today, that we want to validate the findings of those workshops. Having said that, I want to give the goodwill message of the ED to say that you will always have our support on anything that has to do with agricultural mechanization, because as a Center for Agricultural Mechanization, we have the national mandate to mechanize Nigerian agriculture, and anything that will be done to make this come to realization, you will always count on the support of NCAM to make sure it happens. The National Center for Agricultural Mechanization is, like you know, has the general mandate to accelerate the pace of agricultural mechanization application, and development. And we have been doing that over the years. We have been able to develop quite an array of agricultural mechanization technologies. We have been able to test, we have been able to certify, we have been able to train, anything that has to do with mechanization. And we are always ready, to continue to do this with Propcom Mai-karfi and any other stakeholders that are, within the mechanization space. So the National Center for Agricultural Mechanization is really, really, really appreciative of Propcom Mai-karfi on these issues, that has to do with mechanization, that they have been, in the forefront, in carrying out, these workshops. And we'll continue to support you, and we'll continue to make sure that any role that we are expected to play, we will play it without hesitation. Like I used to tell people, we have both the technical and personnel, to be able to drive agricultural mechanization in Nigeria. And we'll continue to do that, without looking back. Thank you very much, and welcome to this workshop. Thank you.
We are going to be inviting Madam Gloria Eko from NESG, Nigeria Economic Summit Group, for their goodwill message. Please put your hands together for her.
I'm going to do mine differently. I'm going to read something. Good morning, everyone. I bring you greetings from the management of Nigerian Economic Summit Group, NESG. In the last 25 years, and still counting, we've been working as a community of private sector-led policy advocacy group and think tank who are focused on promoting sustainable growth and development in the Nigerian economy. In the Agriculture and Food Security Policy Commission, where I facilitate work in NESG, we are driven with the primary objective of facilitating investment in Nigeria-friendly policies through evidence-based advocacies and research-oriented solutions in the agri sector. And like many experts, we believe that doubling agricultural productivity and eliminating hunger and malnutrition in Nigeria and Africa by 2025, if we want to go for SDG, or in NESG we say 2050, because we're talking about shifting gears. It will no more be more than a mirage unless mechanization is accorded utmost importance. Research has indicated that more than three-fourths of farmers in sub-Saharan Africa prepare their land using handheld tools, a practice that entails poor productivity, repels youth, and is incompatible with the continent's zero hunger goal. And here in Nigeria, we want our farmers to be able to use modern agricultural technology, both digital and mechanical, to boost the agricultural sector in a sustainable manner. These consultative meetings, of which NESG has been part of, identify priorities and areas and recommendations for which we, the stakeholders, have chosen to include in our plans, ranging from the need for a stable supply of machine spare parts and innovating financing schemes. And we also recognize the importance of collaborations that allow for policy and economic reforms. In the Agriculture Food Security Policy Commission, we are looking forward to collaborating with Propcom Mai-karfi program on mechanization, not just to upscale investments, and to see how we can promote interventions in the agri-mechanization space in Nigeria. Thank you very much for listening.
All right, let's run through what we have. The journey thus far. About Propcom Mai-karfi, we work in northern Nigeria, now the 6 northeast states, and Kano, Kaduna, Jigawa, till 2021. It's the DFID funded project. We have about 6 focus markets or focal areas. We cover agri input. So we develop interventions or work with private sector partners to unlock solutions to problems within this space. The agricultural input space, the off-taking, storage and market, the agricultural mechanization, you are here, poultry and livestock, climate smart agriculture, policy related initiative. This is about Propcom. To date, we have about 855 831,000 beneficiaries from 2012 to 2018. We will update very soon at the end of 2019. In mechanization alone, we have reached 172,000. In mechanization, what have we been doing? We have been working with different mechanization service providers to provide mechanization services to smallholder farmers in northern Nigeria. Okay, we all know that there was a time when tractor was about 3 to 4 million. Now it's about 10 to 11 million. I don't know how many smallholder farmer can actually, afford one tractor. But with the support or help from mechanization service providers, farmers can now lease tractors, and then, for a day or for two, they use it for their farms, and then they return the tractors back to the MSPs, who also make money from that arrangement. Okay, now these are the things we have been doing in mechanization space in Propcom Mai-karfi. We look at business model designs. We also look at access to finance. It's not enough for you to want to buy 100 tractors, okay? Do you have the money? Thank God there are banks here. We have looked at these issues over again and again. Do you have enough finance or funding to be able to buy, let's say for instance, 100 tractors? To get 100 tractors at 11 million per tractor is 1.1 billion. How are you able to get that? Again, the financial institutions need to come in that space. And we have worked over the years with different banks, First Bank, FCMB, Sterling Banks, to buy tractors, to, working together with them to purchase tractors for MSPs like Tofan and the rest, so that, in return, they can use the tractors for services. All right, so we work in that space. We work in capacity development. We support private sector partners to train agents. Till date, not even to date, for like the past 2 years, we have trained 551 booking and hiring agents across northern Nigeria. In turn, these booking and hiring agents go around the communities, aggregating demands, and then when they finish aggregating demand, they bring the demands to the MSPs to fulfill. Okay, we also help with awareness creation, massive awareness creation. It will amaze you to know that some people have not actually seen tractors within their communities. And for some other ones, they do not even know what a tractor can do. They've only seen tractors in the pages of newspaper or even on TVs where they were being launched, but they have never seen tractors around their community. But if we're able to, raise that awareness, to them, if we're able to create this awareness around them, we know that we start longing and start demanding for tractors to come around their communities. We have enough data to show you that it is cheaper to deploy a tractor than to even get 40 people to work your 1 hectare. Enough data to show you. It's way cheaper. Okay? And a whole lot of farmers are looking for tractors as against the traditional way of getting 40 boys and 50 boys. I was watching one video recently where, like 15 boys were farming and they were singing, somebody was beating the drum and they were farming. I don't know how many of us saw that video. And they were farming the ground and tilling the ground. And I told myself, I said, this can only last for like 1 hour. After 1 hour, they will stand up to go look for food or look for water. But a tractor will not do that, right? Okay, a tractor will not do that. A tractor will deliver, will do whatever you're asking for the next 2, 3, 4 hours. Technological innovation as well, and rural enterprise. Okay, these are the things that we are doing. The process so far, I don't need to bother us with this information. We have seen it several times. But I love to say it. I love to say it again and again. You know why? Because if we understand the problem and it's clearer to us by the day, we all will stand up from this room and go look for those people that matter, those people that matter in government and even around us, to start changing the situation of mechanization in Nigeria. We have less than 5,000 tractors for a country that, according to the UN, says we need 1.7 million. It's a far cry. Tofan is here, all the other MSPs are here, Aluvia, everybody is here. You all know how farmers will ask for tractors from morning to night. They will never get, because there are not enough tractors. There are not enough. I've been looking for a combined harvester for like days. I didn't get. So if you have a combined harvester and you are ready to help one of our farmers, please come to me. I have not gotten a combined harvester, because the combined harvesters that we have are all in Plateau, are all in Nasarawa. They are busy for the next 3 months. Nobody has my time. And me, I'm trying to do 10 hectares. The last person I called said 10 hectares, bye-bye. It's not possible. Okay, so, but how do we get there? Policy can unlock the solution, right? Are we together? Policy can do that, isn't it? Okay, so these are the problems we have. We need about 1.5 million tractors in this country. We have 7 tractors per square kilometer. And we have a teeming population, young people who are ready to farm. I started following a lot of social media handles of young people that are doing agriculture. To date, I have followed up to about 80-something of them. Young people all over, they are beginning to disrupt the system. They are beginning to hunger and thirst, to see how they can change the whole situation. All right, now, these are the challenges. I will use this example. This example is from Tofan, one of our MSPs here. In 2018 or 2017, 28,000 demands. Together, we couldn't even solve like 7,000 of those demands. Yeah, we have 12,000 here, but at the end of the day, how many? A lot of farmers are angry. When they see us sometimes, they go like, you promise you don't deliver. You tell us you bring tractors after 1 month. Where are the tractors? I don't know if the man who was in our office for like 2 months is here. You know what you went through. How that you were looking for a tractor and you were in our office. We need to change this. All right, so let's go on. So we are looking at solving the problem through policy, working with government, state government. I know we have the Gombe State Commissioner for Agriculture here, right? All right, where are you, sir? Okay, welcome very much, sir. Please put your hands together for him. Thank you. And we have representatives from every other state here, permanent secretaries. Can I see your hand? Permanent secretary, thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Now that shows you that genuinely they are interested. They want this thing to change. They want it to move. And we are going to do it. Is it possible? We are going to do it. We are going to do it. I will look forward to that day when I wake up and tractors are everywhere, on the pages, everywhere. All right. Combine harvester. And all right. Okay. And what else? And what else? Combine harvester, everything. Labor saving power tillers, labor saving devices, processing machines, and they are not just, they are cheap, they are affordable. They are everywhere. We will get there. All right. So now we started working around policy, and we are saying, so what explains these were some of the questions that we started out with earlier in the year. That was in January. Okay, these were the questions that led us to a lot of other questions and finally have brought us here so that we can validate our findings. Now, this meeting is for us to say, is this true? Is this not true? Is this yes? Is this no? What we are presenting to you may not be entirely correct. You can say it in your different rooms. You can tell us that, no, this is not like this. This is not how we said it. Okay, so these are the questions we started out with. What explains the persisting low levels of mechanization in the Nigerian agricultural sector? How can policy be used to resolve some of these constraints? Okay, let me say this. It's not everything government, it's not everything policy. Do you agree? Yeah. Because sometimes we are very, very quick to say, hey, government, anything government. It's not everything that is. It's not. Some things are advocacy, some things are for us to engage ourselves in this room. They are for us to ask ourselves questions. Look at that person you have been targeting for the past 1 year and say, you are the problem. All right, please don't do that. Don't mind me. All right. So, is the scope of existing policy on agricultural mechanization sufficient? Do we even have a policy on agricultural mechanization? Is it sufficient? Is my time up? Is it sufficient? What is the appropriate scope of a holistic, integrated agricultural mechanization policy? What is the most pressing and cross-cutting constraint to agricultural mechanization in view of resolution through policy? It's all about how do we together. Some of us here have access that we don't have. Am I correct? You have access to the minister. You have access to presidency. After this meeting, we want you to meet us. Let's stand up from here. Let's create this change. Okay, let's make Nigeria food secure. Okay, let's have everything we want. It's possible. Okay, so what is the appropriate role of all stakeholders in promoting agricultural mechanization? And lastly, what implementation models are most effective for achieving policy objectives? All right. So we started. We wanted to gather evidence, which we did. Okay, some of us were at our various workshops. We had like 7 across Lagos and Abuja. We wanted to understand the challenges to mechanization, the reforms required, and the best framework for implementation. We met, we built consensus. Okay, we are now advocating for change, after which we will hopefully achieve this reform. It's possible, right? We achieve reform, and then we'll build a better collaboration. I love to add something to that line. We'll build a better nation, okay, even beyond the collaboration. Okay, we'll build a better nation across federal. I don't know how many of us saw it in the news. Some tractor drivers, was it in Netherlands or one of those European countries, they were driving along the road. I think they were protesting. You saw it. Hundreds of tractors, hundreds. I was like, what? They were going on a long road. About the number of tractors we have in the whole Nigeria is just in one local government. All right. So yeah, 5 overarching goals, and we are almost there. We achieve reform. I will foster better collaboration. We're almost there, right? I didn't hear it sounding yes. All right. So our approach was simple. Start. And we have a wonderful lady who has been championing the issue of policy. I don't know if it's too much if I say we put our hands together for Aveti Ayu. The lady, you all know her. She's amazing young lady that has been championing this process. So we started stakeholder analysis, scoping study, policy review, federal, state level consultative workshop, multi-stakeholder dialogue. After today, we are going to be working with Nigerian Economic Society Group. Sorry. I've mentioned society like 3 times. Okay, I'm sorry. Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Gloria, I'm sorry. All right. And then with Income, wonderful people, they have traveled with us everywhere. Please put your hands together for them as well. Engineer Demily and Engineer Isaac, wonderful. I like that. All right. And then Nisal as well. So after this whole meeting, when I get to the point, towards the end of this program, we'll talk about what next. We'll still be working with these 3 people. We are looking at a quadripartite agreement, and we'll also be looking at support from you, because we will be engaging government. We understand that there is an agricultural mechanization policy committee now set up by the federal government, right? We are all aware. Okay. Now we are hoping that we'll take this and drop it. This is what we have, and let's unlock. There's no need for anybody to reinvent the wheel. Are we together? And we are going to have all these documents on the internet. So even beyond policy, there are solutions we have synthesized. If you work in the development sector, there are solutions in this document. I don't know how many of us took our time to read the document that Aveti sent to all of us. Amazing solutions. Somebody read it and gave amazing feedback and said, if we can only work with half of this, just half, boom, Nigeria is everywhere. We are together. So it's for every one of us to look at that document, take it, apply it to your own work, apply it to your field, apply it all around you. Then, last, we get to that point where there's adoption, ratification, and draft policy. And I'm glad that when the story is told, at least your name will be mentioned. All right, now we had all these meetings at various times, and then if your name is not here, as some of the organizations that have met, whether one-on-one or as a collective, please let's talk after this meeting so that we can put your name here, because you have contributed to this. Can I ask that we please put our hands together for ourselves for the journey thus far? All right. Okay. So yeah, then the validation workshop we are starting now. We follow this order. We'll review and validate policy priorities. We'll review, validate the findings on constraints and recommendations for completeness. We identify any missing elements. Okay. Because we might not have captured everything. We might not have captured everything you said at those 7 workshops. We might not have captured it. So in case there's still something in your paper, after you read what we sent, you didn't find it, please bring it up. All right, let's help with our phones. Discuss any concerns or challenges linked to the implementation of recommendations. So if you think there will be a big bottleneck, a big problem there, okay, let us know. And if you can help with any of the problems. So let me say this briefly before I go. I see that we had a meeting in Lagos, one of those 7 workshops, and there was this proposal that the vendors, mechanization tractor vendors, should form a pressure group. Yes. Remember? Some people were for, some were against. Because if we're not careful, they'll become, how do you call it in economy? Is it oligarchy or monopoly or something like that? All right, they'll just become a force, and they'll start dictating everything that happens in the in the space. But everything has its pros and its cons, right? Everything has it. I was for the 4, and I'm still for the 4. Like, you are for. Let's even start having that conversation. Okay, all right. So registration, we have done that and all that. So this will be the order of our workshop this morning. Whatever anybody has said in your groups, you don't need to say it again, so that we have a lot to cover. You are all given some documents. We will divide ourselves into groups. When we get there, Abeti will lead us to continue this conversation from here. When we get there, we'll divide ourselves group, and we will look at those things to validate.
For the validation discussion, everybody please welcome Abeti.
She just asked me if I can see because I wear glasses. Yes, I can see. Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Abeti Ayu. I'm, as Godson said, the consultant supporting Propcom Mai-karfi on mechanization and on mechanization policy. Let me sort of continue in the same vein as others by thanking you all very much, honestly, for taking the time to be here today, because I know the majority of people in this room came from outside of Abuja to participate and to contribute towards this effort. So thank you so much for your time. I'm going to run us very quickly through the findings and the data that we gathered from the consultative workshops. And I say quickly because, as Godson said, we'll have discussion sessions where we look at each of the content in detail. So here I'd like to just sort of show us what we have today in view for discussions in the groups. Again, in the beginning of the workshops, we had sort of broad questions or a clear agenda that we're trying to achieve through the consultations, which is, yes, we know the challenges to mechanization in Nigeria. To be honest, as many of us said during the consultation workshops, these challenges are not unfamiliar to the sector. Most of us know what they are. But we wanted to know what the underlying causes, if we can dig a little deeper, to identify the underlying causes for some of those challenges, especially in light of the series of interventions and programs and policies, yes, because that was a recurring statement across, the 7 workshops, which is policies exist. In honesty, policies exist. So we wanted to know what explains the limited efficacy or the limited impact of so many of the efforts being made by the government, being made by non-state actors, being made by development partners like Propcom Mai-karfi to improve mechanization in Nigeria. Why is the situation still as it is? Why is the mechanization level still low? And what are the underlying causes that explain the persistence of those challenges despite the effort being put into resolving some of those challenges? So what we did, as Godson again already mentioned, we asked you a series of questions around, what these causes are, questions around existing policy, because again, we wanted to query the fact that while policy does exist, why is the situation still as it is? So we wanted to know what the issues around existing policy are. We talked about issues like a lack of awareness. I remember in one of the workshops, actually in more than one of the workshops, 1 or 2 participants would point to a policy that they are aware of, that they have taken advantage of in their activities, but that the larger quorum had no idea even existed. So we identified issues around a lack of awareness. We talked about implementation, which is sort of the national outcry. Once people hear policy, everyone shouts implementation. We talked about issues around implementation, but when mechanization is concerned, we also discussed the scope of existing policy. That was one of the questions we had, and the question there was, yes, policy does exist. In fact, if I did an excerpt and I shared with everyone, but if you look in the current national agriculture policy, there are broad statements on mechanization in there. The question then becomes, is that sufficient? I remember we discussed this, and if it's insufficient, to what extent and in what direction does that policy need to be expanded? And then we also try to go a step further to perhaps identify or beginning to identify preliminary suggestions on the sort of statements we want to see on that expanded policy. Okay, so that said, we were able to categorize most of the issues that were raised under these 10 overarching constraint areas. From our cleaning up of the data, there were over 40 or 50 different sub-issues that were identified and broken down. So we tried to categorize all of those under 10 areas. The first being
to credit. And then we also try to sort of arrange them in order of their recurrence across the consultative workshops. So a key area is access to credit for agricultural mechanization investments. Another area is the cost of machinery. Like Godson said, it's almost impossible for the average smallholder farmer or even MSPs to begin to afford by themselves a single tractor. We all know the effect of exchange rates on more or less doubling the prices of a lot of agricultural machinery at the moment. So the cost of machinery is currently a huge issue. The cost of mechanization services to farmers. Here we're looking at things like, okay, for example, we estimated the average per hectare cost for tractor services at 25,000 naira, and then compare that to the levels of the low incomes of smallholder farmers, asking questions around affordability. However, many of the MSPs made a valid point, which is if we're providing service, mechanization service to fragmented farmlands, each of or most of which are less than 2 hectares, there are very, very high logistic costs attached to moving those tractors, around the place. And those are some of the overhead costs that inform or affect the cost of mechanization services. So that's another area. The fourth area is maintenance. I think when we spoke with the MSPs and the associations, this was a huge one. In fact, MECA, I think, came and spoke to us by themselves about maintenance of agricultural machinery and the very high incidence of broken down tractors and other machinery in Nigeria. I think MECA estimated it at above 100 or 150,000 currently, and the issues around maintenance have to do with spare parts, with the skills of operators, with sufficient supply of mechanics. So those are some of the issues we'll be discussing today. Policy implementation gaps or policy environment inefficiencies. For me, this is a big one, and I think for many of us in this room, we already agreed that the lack, yes, there is policy. That's given. The first question is the policy sufficient? And then the main, even overarching issue is the lack of an implementation framework that sort of translates those broad statements into goals and objectives and measurable programs and projects and actions, a strategy that gets us from those broad statements to some form of impact. So that's a key issue in the policy environment. In the governance environment, I think there are a few issues there, but there we look a lot at NCAM. We all know that NCAM, which is the National Center for Agricultural Mechanization, is the only agency with a national mandate on mechanization in Nigeria, but they are constrained in so many ways and by so many things. There are also other interrelated, governance issues, such as, synergy between the different agencies all implementing the same mandates and, or implementing complementary mandates, not the same mandates. And then access to land, or rather access to contiguous land. We try to qualify it because once you mention land, it becomes a big, a big kettle to sort of handle. So we qualified it by calling it access to contiguous land and the issues and how that bears on successful mechanization. So I think that from this categorization of the overarching constraint areas, we can already see that policy needs to be a lot broader than what it is currently, because there are so many, the breadth of interrelated issues that bear on successful mechanization in Nigeria needs to be accounted for, or at least better accounted for than it currently is in policy as it is today. We talk about indigenous fabrication, we talk about research, development, and innovation, and then, sufficient private sector engagement in policy design, and then advocacy. Godson already talked about, one of the suggestions, which was the constitution of an advocacy group. Now, that said, I want to sort of bring our attention back to something Godson said, which is, yes, there are so many issues, but it is a matter of fact that not every issue is an issue for policy. Not every issue is an issue for government resolution. There are some that are market issues. There are some that require advocacy. And by advocacy, I mean, or rather we mean, approaching the right institution or the right principal who has the power, the authority to make a quick change to unlock whatever that challenge is. Some of the issues are even issues for technical assistance, for example. For example, when we talk about standards, there's a huge resource outlay required, to establish standards for all agricultural machinery. So does that become an issue for policy, or is that an issue where technical assistance from the right partner, can help move things further along? So in that vein, or with that thinking, we tried to tease out from the numerous, let me quickly just say that after this, we will show, and I'm sure like you all have the handouts, we have broken down these overarching areas into their issues with the underlying causes that we've identified, and some of the recommendations from you all on how to address some of those issues. So from that breakdown, we try to tease out a few issues, or the issues that appear to be more relevant to policy. And again, before I read this, I would like to reiterate that the reason we're here is to more or less validate this. This is by no means set in stone, right? This we're able to tease out, again, based on the feedback, because if some of you will remember, we had this debate about a dichotomy between policy issues and advocacy issues, and I remember, I think, Professor Ayola saying, what's the difference between policy and advocacy? So, we had extensive discussions. We tried to tease out, what were identified as the issues more relevant related to policy. So the first one, which I already mentioned, is the need to sort of translate those broad statements in the current national, because there is policy on agricultural mechanization. As a matter of fact, the national policy outlines 4 statements, right, pertaining specifically to mechanization. The first being to promote private sector-led mechanization services, to stimulate domestic production of equipment, to unlock or to provide mechanization funds, to make mechanization funds available to the sector, and then to avoid government direct purchase and distribution of tractors to farmers. These broad statements, there are a few programs that have been born from these statements, yes, but there's no implementation strategy whatsoever with goals, objectives, measurable programs, actions, projects that guide us from these broad statements to any form of impact. And we know that in policy making, the strategy development is a step down from, coming up with the broad overarching policy. So that's a key gap. And this, to be honest, largely explains, or to a significant extent, explains a lot of the lack of coordination across the mechanization space in Nigeria. The positive thing here is, the Federal Ministry of Agriculture very recently, I think even in this period that we've been doing the consultative workshops and, also engaging with them, already began to constitute a national committee on mechanization policy. So as Godson said, the intention is to take this feedback with the report to them to inform deliberations on that committee. So the second area for policy is, like I've already said, expanding policy beyond land preparation, expanding policy beyond tractorization, expanding policy beyond indigenous fabrication. A key area is irrigation infrastructure, and to be honest, I think this was a strong theme across the workshops, which is the importance irrigation plays in unlocking mechanization. We know that there's irrigation, there's land clearing, there's post-harvest storage activities and processing, but I'd like to put the spotlight on irrigation and how irrigation affects asset utilization, how asset utilization then affects access to credit. Because a key issue that, for example, some of the financial institutions who attended and who are with us here raised today is the unattractiveness of the cash flows from mechanization loans based on the single season farming practice in Nigeria. And that clearly, without me saying too much, we can already see how trying to unlock some things in irrigation infrastructure can increase asset utilization, which then has a knock-on effect on cash flows and on payback periods and on the willingness of banks really to lend for mechanization. So the recommendation is to expand policy to cover irrigation infrastructure, which is why it's emboldened there. And then, of course, land clearing, which is a topic that is very pertinent, especially in the Southwest. You know, we have different agroecological zones in Nigeria with different needs, and land clearing is a very serious issue, especially in the Southwest. Post-harvest storage activities, as well as on-farm small and medium-scale processing. Introduce policy on light mechanization. I think it's Professor Osuji that I think of as the man of light mechanization, because he had an entire presentation. For those of us that attended the workshop, he really educated us on the possibilities in employing intermediate technologies, simpler handheld, labor-saving devices that are more relevant and more applicable to local conditions and to the needs of local farmers. So we're not saying that heavy-duty equipment is not useful. In fact, there was a recommendation to also expand the focus from smallholder farmers to commercial farmers who are able to better leverage heavy-duty equipment. But the fact of the matter remains that we still have a very large population of smallholder farmers who need technologies that they are better able to use. 0% interest rates on government intervention funds. So there we put a question mark, right? Because when we talk about issues around access to credit, one of the things that was discussed is, the cost of funds to banks of dealing in government agriculture funds. And one of the suggestions was for the interest rates to be revised downwards. Whether that's possible, that's a question that we hope to answer here today. And whether that's something that we need to put forward, that's a question that we hope to answer here today. Include tractors and other agricultural machinery in the national automotive policy. So the fact that agricultural machinery is not currently captured in the automotive policy is an oversight, or we believe is an oversight, or rather the participants believe is an oversight and should be rectified. Introduce policy on compulsory in-country assembly of tractors. Now the rationale behind that recommendation is to first off, reduce the cost of importing machinery. This also ties to the policy on tariffs. When we talked about the cost of agricultural machinery, a key challenge or a key problem area that was raised is tariffs, high tariffs on mechanization, and the fact that the zero tariff policy of the past administration was discontinued. But on sort of a deeper dive, we discover that while tariffs have been introduced on the importation of, say, tractors, for example, at 35%, the zero tariff policy still applies to the importation of knockdown parts. And the intention there, or our understanding is that the intention there is to encourage in-country assembly of tractors, which would then have positive effects, such as reducing the price of this machinery, as well as, facilitating knowledge transfer, and things like that. So we've put that there as one of the issues in view for policy. Another one is extending the zero tariffs policy to tipping trailers and agricultural machinery spare parts. The issue of spare parts is a huge one, especially when maintenance is concerned, because you hear things like, well, yes, tractors break down, but we don't have sufficient spare parts. We don't even have original spare parts to properly maintain the tractors. Like I already said, for access to credit, we talk about the interest rates on loans, we talk about the lack of financial sector interest or appetite for agricultural lending, we talk about the unattractiveness of cash flows on mechanization loans, especially because of low asset utilization. We talk about the difficult access to NERSAL credit risk guarantees. We talk about rejection of buyback agreements by the equipment vendors, and here the solution was to sort of create secondary markets around used mechanization equipment. But I would like the vendors in the room to also speak a little more to this issue, to see the conditions, if there are any conditions under which buyback clauses will be agreed to. Unwillingness of state governments to offer ISPOs for federal government agriculture funds. I mean, maybe the commissioners and PAMSECs in the room can speak to this issue as well. The high cost of agricultural machinery. So we talk about the effect of exchange rates on cost. Not that there's any, I really don't know that there's anything policy related that can immediately be done to alleviate high exchange rates or the depreciation of the naira. But I remember one of the suggestions was for the government to continue to provide bridging finance on mechanization. So this is an issue that we can query here today. Customs duties on importation of agricultural machinery and spare parts. And then the classification of agricultural machinery all under one HS code. So that way, any policy that is enacted on machinery will necessarily apply to all agricultural machinery, as opposed to only the machines that are currently captured under a certain HS code. We talk about introducing subsidy programs at state level for farmers. We talk about, I think a key one here for the cost of mechanization services to farmers is the focus on light mechanization or intermediate, handheld labor-saving devices. We talk about the limited number of mechanization service providers in a large market. Now, we already know, like I read earlier, that one of the policy thrusts is for the government to encourage market entry into the mechanization service space. So how can they do that? Because like we already said, the statement is there is no attendance strategy with measurable actions on how to make that come to life. So there we've talked about introducing incentives for private sector investment in the service provision space. And how and what suggestions, I guess, or what measurable goals and programs can be introduced around that recommendation. For poor maintenance, I already mentioned the limited scale of service personnel. So here we're talking about operators, for example, in correctly operating machinery or in correctly accounting for factors that lead to machinery breakdown, such as poor land development or soil rockiness and things like that. The shortage of skilled mechanics and how the available pool of mechanics, roadside or otherwise, can be conscripted and trained on how to fix heavy duty or light agricultural machinery. We talk about the limited availability and high cost of spare parts. I spoke about that already. And then the importation of inferior machinery, which again is directly related to NCAM being able to regulate and enforce the type of equipment that's imported into Nigeria for better standardization. Still on poor maintenance, we talk about the lack of standards for agricultural machinery. So whose responsibility is it? Here we've captured it as, develop standards for agricultural machinery led by SON in collaboration with NCAM, but we also know that NCAM's law allows it to certify and standardize independently. So we would like to sense check that. And then poor storage of mechanization equipment. For the policy environment, we already talked about the lack of an implementation strategy framework, the lack of state agriculture sector policies, the focus on land preparation, where we said it's important to expand policy to include things like irrigation and post-harvest storage, and of course small on-farm processing, as well as expand the technology selection beyond heavy-duty equipment to, like we already said, light mechanization or intermediate technologies, as well as the need to conduct needs assessments to properly engage farmers so that policies can be designed properly and technologies can be selected, the correct technology can be selected. We talk about the distortionary impact of government procurement on mechanization markets. Again, within current policy, the policy is avoid government direct procurement. Whether that obtains or not, is captured here as well. We answer questions around regulating private sector provision of mechanization services. This in particular was raised during the workshops with state commissioners and PAMSECs, where they raised concerns about the cost of mechanization services. Like I said, per hectare cost of tractor services estimated at 25,000. So they raised concerns about that cost outlay compared to the incomes and the savings of smallholder farmers, and whether there is a need to sort of intervene to regulate the sector or introduce some guidelines there. And then finally, we talk about private sector engagement. proper engagement of citizens, so farmer groups, of the private sector in policy design, so proper representation. For example, on this National Committee for Agricultural Mechanization that has been constituted, that's a key recommendation, to ensure sufficient, rather than confer with a limited pool of interest, to ensure sufficient representation of farmers and other groups on that committee, to make sure that the policies and the programs that are born from the deliberations are appropriate. I hope that we're able to validate properly as well as fill any gaps as we go forward. So thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Smallholders do best in clusters all over the world. And if we can get smallholders to cluster, they begin now to have the image of big players, and the economy of scale will begin to play out. So if we can get them properly organized, then the issue of fragmentation will not be there. The issue of land mechanization becomes enhanced because you cannot develop the contiguous areas irrespective of land holding. And then it becomes easy for extension and state government support to enable planting uniform materials at the same time across vast areas to be harvested at the right time, at the same time, to support industry.
I have an app here that if I stand on my farm and I register, right, it appears as a dot on the map of Nigeria. If I stand here and I register here, it will capture the position where I am standing. Now, if mechanization service providers like Nkam, you are over there, you register Nkam on the app, it captures Nkam as a dot over there in Ilori. I am a farmer in Makurdi. I go to my farm and I also register my farm. My farm appears like a dot on the map of Nigeria, so that if I need a service, all I need to do is request for the service on the app, and then we get my request immediately, and all the other surrounding service providers, and then they can talk to me, and then we can negotiate, and then the job is done. So I think under innovation, we can bring this issue of technology so that we can bridge the gap, because I think most of the problem is that there are people providing mechanization services, but we don't know where they are. I'm speaking from the point of a farmer.
Group 4, where I was, and Group 2 would appreciate this, that the major gap in our system is the knowledge about machines, knowledge of mechanization, knowledge about management of agricultural machinery. And this is what has been identified by the Ofapit Institute of Technology in New York. And they have decided that in 1 week, if we have 3 delegates from each of the 774 local governments, they are going to pass the information that will change their whole understanding about agricultural machines, management, and use as it is globally. We know that that knowledge is not with our people, but we can pass this information to them. I'm representing that institute, and they intend to send you, it's a Nigerian, and the professor is standing on the shoulders of Albert Einstein and Isaac Newton, and some of you may have known about him, Professor Gabriel Oyibo of Gagot.
In as much as we are trying to see how we can bring this equipment, let them be something that the smallholder farmer can actually increase production, generate more money, and be able to pay for those machines back. Thank you very much.
I think there is a need for us to please pull back a bit and to take a look at all the suggestions that have been presented today, and we'll go back and look at our history. Some couple of years ago, I bought, that was in 1985. I used to have a 50-hectare farm at Ilora Farm Settlement, and I bought a complete set of tractors for about 6,000 naira from Niteco. 6,000 naira. We had a history in this country where we have 3 plants that were coupling tractors and various equipment. Steyr in Bauchi, Fiat in Kano, and Leland in Ibadan. Am I right? Some few years after that, we also have the Babangida agricultural land development laws of policy, or even a decree where they were developing land for agricultural purposes. My question, gentlemen, to you is this. Where did we fail? Because if you don't know where you failed, you cannot make progress. So can we pull back momentarily to take a look at those good success stories and to find out why those plans, those investments failed?
I want to talk on the innovation on the IT side, which was spoken a while ago. We in Origin Group have been in the forefront of innovation. And I'll tell you, if you have your phones here, if you tap www.tog.ng, anywhere you are, you can request for tractor services all over Nigeria. And I will tell you also, go to any social media, tractor on the go as a sentence. We are on Instagram, we are on Twitter, we are on everything. And as of now, we have the apps. So from there, you can request for tractor services. Right now, we have over 700 farmers registered on our platform. And our plan is to take it to about 2 million by the end of first quarter 2020. The innovation is the way to go, and we have been in the forefront. So innovation is not the problem, or IT. We have IT, but most of these farmers, are they actually IT savvy? You have to send people to the field to get them to create the awareness. And it's only when you create the awareness that they can be a part of it.
Truth of the matter is that when you're talking about technology and you're talking about smallholders farmers, it has to be a complementary service. You cannot isolate technology without having your hands on the field and your legs on the field. It will take a while for Nigeria to get there, where once you have technology, it is technology. But as it is, it's going to be a gradual process from eventually evolving to full-fledged technology, which is digitalization. We're not yet there yet, but we'll get there.
Honestly speaking, I have to commend Propcom for an excellent work. When I was reading the submission you gave us earlier on, it's as if we are just reading our minds. It has really shown that the paperwork was a bottom-top approach. I recommend you people for exposing that thing very well. One of the major problems we have is that income has been buried because of non-implementation of policies. all these laws we're talking about, they are there. They are there to support income. I know when we are growing, we adopted the Nebraska testing code into Nigeria and embedded in the National Institution of Agricultural Engineers that henceforth any tractor that is coming into this country must be tested at income. Now we have history. We go out on the field. We see governors will go and buy 1,000 units of tractors. When you come, before you know, within 1 month you see about 70, 100 tractors could not even move from point of what do you call it, submission to your destination where you are supposed to have your tractors. Why? Because we have so many proliferation of vendors and tractors coming into unchecked.
It looks like we may be leaving out two sectors, and I would like Nkam to take serious note of this. Maritime and fishing. There are a lot of things opening up there. They are also in need or actually operate mechanization. And there are standards there as it is. This is something perhaps we need to at least capture representation of those that operate in that sector in a forum like this so that we are not leaving them out.
I want to say a big thank you to everybody for coming. Thank you so very much. We are grateful. Next steps, we will continue to pursue the policy issues with in collaboration with NESG, Income, and NISA. And then from time to time, we'll also be calling on some of us, for some specific meetings, especially, the vendors, the MSPs, and even the government, the state government representatives. All right, so that is what will be happening. We hope to see this taken to the level, to the last point where it will become law, where some things will become acts and all that, right? So please, like I said, thank you very much for coming.
Today we have the Agri Mechanization Policy Validation Workshop. We are here to validate a series of consultative meetings we have had in the past. We have had about 7 different consultative meetings, meeting different people and partners across Nigeria to walk us through the issues or challenges affecting the mechanization space in Nigeria. So today we are here to submit our report and for our various partners to help us look at this report and to sort of provide a sense check of this report to be sure that I've captured effectively what they wanted to say or what they said at those consultative meetings, and to be able to take it from here to the government, present it to the government as a collective response from every stakeholder in the mechanization space. Various stakeholders we have here cut across the equipment vendors such as John Deere, TAC, Springfield, and the MSPs we have here, or the mechanization service providers have here cut across Tuan, Tufan, Alluvial, ACT. The federal agencies have here cut across different state governments and Federal Ministry of Agri, and then so many other partners that are here. The federal government and the state government are very, very strong collaborators with us in this process. They have been with us all along, right from the very first collaborative meeting right to this validation workshop. They are here with us to take forward whatever it is we are all agreeing together in this place. They will take it forward and see how they can make it into laws that will eventually impact the lives of the smallholder farmers all across Nigeria.
Okay, let me just start by saying I'm congratulating ourselves, Propcom and other stakeholders that came into this stakeholders meeting. Right from the word start, you can see all the stakeholders that are being involved in the mechanization step are there in the consultative forum, in which the facilitators who facilitate the process, they have interrogated all the people that are there in the space, in which they have had their bottleneck challenges and their other recommendations in which they have provided during this consultative forum. Yeah, we cannot emphasize much from government because private sector driven something can be more sustainable rather than government. But there are some aspects that we need government to come in, like incentives for maybe clustering farmers who need services so that they can have access to tractor hiring services.
Well, I've been part of the meeting from the onset, and it is a meeting that has opened my eyes to so many things, especially as it has to do with mechanization. Everybody that has participated in this workshop is better informed, because the idea I had before now was like mechanization is just for the federal government and the state government. But now I have seen that there are organizations that have interest, showing more interest than even the government itself in the area of mechanization. So it's really a very good workshop. With this great work that Propcom Mai-karfi is doing, in the next 5 years, I'm sure mechanization will go a long way. People that have never even heard about it in the villages will be beneficiaries of what they are doing now. And I think in the next 5 years, government may have little or no role to play in mechanization.
Over the years, precisely since about 2011 till date, the engagements, meetings, coming together, different fora of agriculture stakeholders in Nigeria has actually gone up, and we are seeing the benefits. It looks like the more we are able to meet and talk to ourselves, the more everybody understands each other and synergy is created. And you can see it in the improvements we've seen in agriculture. Today, we can proudly say that nobody is paying lip service to agriculture, because agriculture is serious business now. We're even talking about rate of investment and all that. So for today's meeting, it has come to that point where we are now specializing. Mechanization is a specialist thing. It is something all stakeholders have yearned for. And it is something we must do well if we must propel our agriculture. With the diversity of stakeholders invited, we have people from government, from industry, from research and academia, from all kinds of institutions that affect the mechanization issues that we are addressing.
It's fantastic. This is one of the few times in the planning and policy processes for agricultural development where we have strict following of different components and different stages of policy formulation, policy articulation, before we arrive at a concise policy document. In this particular case, the process is designed and is being followed for the purpose of generating or articulating a mechanization policy for Nigeria. It is very good, it's all inclusive, brings the views of stakeholders into the process as critical inputs in the process. It helps harmonization of these views before it constitutes a national policy, and also fills the gaps in policy coherence, policy sustainability, policy continuity, and such other valuable and desirable features of a good and standard policy articulation for this country. It is fantastic and encouraged. This country has a lot to thank the project, the Propcom Mai-karfi project, for going through the mill in observing these different stages of consultation before we can bring about a policy document on mechanization. Our vision of mechanization is a long-term one, because it is on mechanization that the desire of this country is anchored for the purpose of pursuing industrial agriculture. We cannot continue to depend on small-scale agriculture endlessly.
Honestly, I'm really impressed. I had the opportunity of attending one of the consultative workshops in Lagos. I was part of the discussions, and from what I've seen, because the papers have been circulated, I've seen the documentation, and I must say that it's quite exhaustive. I am also impressed when I noticed that, or when I saw that almost everybody on the mechanization value chain was consulted, and that's quite impressive. It means that it was the assignments that Propcom Mai-karfi has taken up, that it was quite thoroughly done. I saw that the equipment owners, everybody, the farmers, from the documentations I've seen, financial institutions, everybody has been taken care of, and everybody was consulted. And what that will mean is that by the time the document is out, you hardly see anybody that will claim ignorance of what was done. And you see that it will be very, very exhaustive, because the consultation has been very wide, in my opinion. Well, for me, you see, as a country, it's good that we are getting to this stage that we want to tell ourselves some home truth. Because, you know, before now, we've been enjoying the largesse of oil. But I'm happy to also see from what is happening and from all the things going on that as a country we are beginning to tell ourselves the truth. Because if we must sustain our economy, we definitely need to diversify. And the lowest hanging fruit towards that diversification is agriculture. We are blessed as a country with a lot of agricultural and mineral resources, which if we tap, will really take us very far. We may not really even need to be talking about oil if we're able to greatly harness the potentials that agriculture has. So mechanization also in the next 5 to 10 years, without any arguments, is the way to go. Because before now, a lot of our cultivations have been on the subsistence level, which is not sustainable, and it will not take us where we want to be as a country. So if we want to seriously diversify our economy, then we need to take mechanization seriously.
I want to appreciate the UK Propcom, or PM, that's Propcom Mai-karfi. I see them having a great vision, looking at the area where Nigeria or Africa, but Nigeria is the largest country in Africa, and the Nigerian's problem is solved. I think half of African problem is solved. They look at the major problem we have that can stop poverty, food insecurity in the nation or in the continent. And one of the problems that is affecting food insecurity is lack of mechanization. Many of our farmers, many of the farm practices are peasant. That means subsistence farming. Farmer farm to feed and maybe little to sell. When I started my university, I put in for agricultural engineering. So when my mate asked me, they know I'm in faculty of engineering, they say, which of engineering? I was ashamed to tell them, because anytime they hear agricultural engineering, they say agbe. Agbe means farmer. Farmer means a farmer is a poor person, because majority of farmers in Africa, in Nigeria particularly, are poor because they do not mechanize their agriculture. But in the country where agriculture is developed, one big agricultural develop is mechanization of agriculture. And what the role of Propcom UK with this policy, acceleration policy, policy to accelerate mechanization in Nigeria, if the policy is not on ground, even there's no existing policy that can make mechanization to be on. So with effort that have been on for months, almost a year or more than that, to bring out a policy that will back up mechanization and we accelerate it, invariably that will help our production, help our productivity. There is difference between production and productivity. You know, production is when you have a particular area you are covering, maybe 2 hectares, or the whole nation covering 10,000 hectares. But when we have mechanization, we help us to increase our production from 10,000 hectares to about 100, even to 1 million. Because now you are using machine effort, you are using technology to do what man are doing.